Good morning. I'm so glad that you're here this morning again. Those of you that's online, those of you that's here in the service, we are glad that you are here. Our God is great and He is greatly to be praised. We are excited to be in the house of the Lord this morning. We are excited for what God is doing this morning, doing at Dayspring, doing in our world, doing in our church. God is doing great works. He is truly doing great works. So we at Dayspring are in the process of the Emotionally Balanced Life series. It's very important that we become emotionally balanced. If we become emotionally balanced in life, then we become emotionally balanced in our spiritual life as well. And then we become usable, we become conduits through which the Lord can move. We've talked about that several times over the last few weeks that we've been in the boundaries lessons, that when our conduits are clogged up, you clog up a drain, there's nothing going down. How many's ever had a clogged drain in your house? There is nothing going through that drain. Sometimes everything comes up, and if you're not careful, it goes on the floor, goes wherever. But it's not going to go through if you have that clog until you get that clog out. That's what happens in life. When we let life get clogged up, drama and stress and anxiety and terrible relationships and decisions and things that we do, it clogs our drains. So the Spirit of the Lord cannot flow freely through us. What a tragedy that is. In the Word of God, we began our series learning about the Lord and His relationship with us. We studied at length God's relationship with Cain. How God gave Cain many chances. God loved Cain very much. But Cain was free to make a choice, and he made his choice that he didn't want to obey God. He wanted to do what he wanted to do. He wanted to bring the sacrifice he wanted to bring. And he demanded that God receives it. That's how our world is today. That people go throughout life and they bring God what they want to bring Him. They serve Him in the way that they want to serve Him. They take the Bible, if you will, take the things out that they like and just push down the things that they don't like and saying that's irrelevant and it doesn't apply. The problem is the Word never said that. All the Word applies. It's all relevant. It all matters. And so as we begin our journey in our life with God, we have to make sure that we apply His Word properly. And so in His Word, He teaches us how to have healthy relationships, how to have a healthy, balanced life. We're going to go through quite a few things in our series. They're listed on our chart. I'm not going to take time to read them this morning. Take time to familiarize yourself, because we are going to develop healthy skills, healthy emotional skills, and so that we can be healthy people. How many want to be healthy for Jesus? God, I want you to flow through my life. Touch your heart. Say, healthy relationships begin with me. Every healthy relationship begins with me. You know what? You can touch on the other side, please don't. Unhealthy relationships begin with me too. Amen. Unhealthy relationships begin with me too. It's my choice. If I want to have healthy relationships, they begin with me. Then I have to invest in, and I have to learn, and I have to practice, and I have to allow God to teach me. I need to be teachable, because I'm not born into this world with an automatic knowledge how to have a healthy relationship. I wish I was. But we're born into sin, and so we make mistakes, and we make faults, and we have failures. And so then we tend not only to hurt ourselves, but those around us. Not because we want to, but because that's become our habit. That becomes what we know, and that just becomes how we live. And we never stop to change it unless it's purposeful. So we're taking time at Dayspring in the next few months, and we are purposely going to stop and say, God, heal my emotions. Let my life become balanced. Lord, teach me to be balanced. I want to be balanced for Jesus. I want to have balance in my life, because God can operate and move through balance. God wants to be able to operate through me, and if I am healthy, He will do that. So we have been studying about healthy boundaries. How many remember the 3 most important steps of boundaries? Who remembers? Anybody? Establish, communicate, Enforce. Establish. First, we must establish our boundary prayerfully. We've studied every one of these steps at length. Lord, prayerfully, let me determine what boundary it is that's lacking in my life. What boundary is? I know that boundaries are lacking when I feel hurt, when I feel angry, when my emotions rise up within me in relationships and I feel violated. Guess what? There's a boundary violation there. Amen. That tells me that there's something unhealthy in that relationship. Does that mean that I just need to walk away? Nope. That means I need to learn to create healthy boundaries. Remember, God has healthy boundaries with us. He tells us how far we can come and how far we can go. He tells what it requires to be in His presence and what cannot be in His presence. You ever read 10 Commandments? What do they say? Thou shalt not lie. What else? Speak it up.
Have no other gods.
Have no other gods before me. What else? Not take His name in vain.
Honor mommy and
Bear
dad.
false witness. Honor your parents. Thou shalt not commit adultery. That's right. God gave us His law. And He said, this is what's allowed in my presence. He said the drunkard's not going to enter in. The liar, that's not going to enter into His presence. He tells us exactly what is allowed in His presence. What are you responsible for? How many remember? Your fence, your yard, your territory, your area of responsibility that God gave you. Remember our diagrams we used? I'm responsible for the territory that God placed around my life, my yard, so to speak. I'm not responsible for my neighbors. I'm not responsible for yours or my husband's or my daughter's. I'm only responsible for mine, as are you. But if I step outside of my yard into your yard, what am I doing? I'm trespassing. And I committed a what? A violation of your boundary. And I put myself into your territory, and I don't belong there, do I? That's putting my nose in your business. Verbally, physically, however, that's not my business. Because that's not what God made me accountable for. I am accountable for what God placed within my territory. I am responsible to take care of my life. I'm responsible for what God has placed in my life. But I am not responsible for my neighbor's life. And I'm not responsible to make their decisions for them or to invest my opinions on what they should do. That's between them and God. It's not a triangle between my neighbor, me, and God, right? That's between them and God. My territory, my relationship with God determines what I do in my yard, as it does in your yard. We're reviewing a minute here. Why? Why are we doing that? Because if we do not set healthy boundaries, people won't know how to act around us. Did you know that? If you do not set healthy boundaries, and I do not set healthy boundaries in my life or your life, people will not know how to act around us. They're uncertain. They don't know when you're going to blow up and when you're not going to blow up. When you're going to be violated or not violated. They have no idea where your boundary wall exists. If you don't put a fence up, nobody knows where your property line is. If there's no fence around your property, I really don't know where your property line is. And I could in error walk in your property line and it wouldn't even be on purpose. That's what happens in relationships. But then perhaps the neighbor gets mad because I walked in their property, but they never established the property line. It's vital that you establish healthy boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They are not meant and not established to control the people around you. Boundaries are to protect your own territory. They communicate what is yours and what is not, and what you allow in your area of responsibility. If you do not have healthy boundaries, then we are left feeling violated, dishonored, disrespected, and sometimes we're angry. They should know. They know. They already know. Well, let me give you a clue. They don't know. How can they? Because you've never communicated to them. This is my boundary, and I will not allow you to be cursed in my presence. I will not allow you to disrespect me or to rage at me or to harm me physically. You have to communicate what you will and what you will not allow in your presence, just like the Lord does. Is that wrong? No. We're learning by the Lord's example. We don't make boundaries to control other people, remember that? Or to create walls and barriers. Boundaries are meant for healing. They are not meant for control. They are meant to have healthy relationships. Without boundaries, the flip side of the coin is, without healthy boundaries, then I'm less likely to recognize boundaries of other people. Because I'm so familiar with walking in and out of everyone's business and crossing in and out of everyone's lines. I don't have healthy boundaries myself. I'm not going to be as apt. I let people walk in and out of mine, so I'm just going to walk in and out of theirs. I am more apt to not recognize the boundaries of people around me because I haven't practiced healthy boundaries for myself. Then that causes me to unknowingly dishonor and disrespect them, not purposely, but do it because it just becomes the habit of my life. You ever hear somebody say, well, that's just the way I am? Look at your neighbor, look him real good in the eye, and say, but you can change.
But you can change.
How many believe that? You know what change is? Change is a choice, and it's a decision. Oh, it's not that simple. Oh, but it is. Change always starts with a choice and with a decision. It takes practice. You might need some guidance to make the change happen, but change can happen. And it will happen if you purpose in your life to make it happen. God, I want my relationships to be healthy. They need to be healthy. We say, God, use me, use me, use me. God, why aren't you using me? I'm so frustrated. I can't feel Him. I come to church and I don't feel Him, and I don't heal Him, and I pray and nothing happens, and all these things, and we get all worked up. And then I would say, how is your vessel? Is your clog drained up with drama and life and strife and unhealthy relationships and unhealthy ways? Does that mean you need to fix everything before you come to Christ? Absolutely not. But let that be the start of your journey to creating a healthy lifestyle that includes healthy boundaries. We need that. We need to be healthy in our relationships. Why? Because it's God's will that we have healthy relationships. Our key verse that we have read every single week since we started our series is Romans 12 and 18. And it says, if it be possible, as much as lieth in you, as much as what is in your control. Did we learn doing this that we cannot control what our neighbor does? We cannot tell them, stop it. Quit doing what you're doing. Stop talking that way. We don't have a right to tell them what to do we? Well, we have a right to say, when you behave in that manner, I will remove myself. I'm not going to be in your presence when you speak that way or when you act in that particular way. Because you control you. We cannot control them. As much as it be possible, as much as lieth in you, as much as what you can do, live peaceably with all men. Some people might say that, oh, my family's not peaceful, so I can never be in peace. Oh, no, not true. Because you can choose to have healthy boundaries in your life, healthy communication in your life, and God will teach you to live in peace. You can live in peace in the middle of chaos because you know how to separate yourself from the chaos. You know how to remove yourself from the drama and from the hurt and from the abuse and from the pain. God will guide us. God will teach us. This is vital. Every healthy relationship has healthy boundaries. Every healthy relationship has boundaries. God's relationship with us has boundaries. And I would say that is a healthy relationship, and it should be. That's what He offers unto us. We have to do likewise. Lord, let me follow your example in my life. We know the way we think and the way we talk, the way we act, the way we look. But what about in our inner relationships? Did God speak about that? Absolutely He did. And we're going to continue to learn about them as we go through our Balanced Life study. I'm excited that you're here today. I'm excited that you have come to study. We're going to continue on in our lesson today as we go forward in the next couple of weeks. Our next series is going to be on communication. We need to have healthy communication with the Lord and with others as well, so that we are clearly understood. But today, I want us to take the last little bit of time that we have. We've studied a lot about establishing our boundary, taking time to prayerfully seek and say, God, I'm violated in this way. This person disrespects me. Maybe they hurt me bodily or emotionally or verbally. Whatever it is, whatever's happening in my yard or my life that's violating my boundary, it's a violation. I know because I'm hurt, I'm angry. I know. And so I take that before God and say, God, I want to set up something in my life that creates a healthy boundary for me with all my relationships, but I want it to be right and good before God. Every boundary you make, you seek the Lord and make sure it's right and it's good and that it's fair. If you need help with that, you come see Pastor and I. We will help you with that. Sometimes balancing that off, because boundaries are not about controlling the people around us. Our desire is to have healthy relationship with those around us, whether it's our co-workers, our friends, our children, our grown children, our parents maybe, our children, whoever it is. We've got our spouses. We need healthy relationships. So we need to be very wise in how we handle them. Seeking God, what should that boundary look like? And then I've got to clearly communicate that to them. And I have to clearly establish, this is what the violation is. And if you do this, then I am going to do this. If you continue to rant and rave, then I'm going to remove myself from your presence. Can I stop them from ranting and raving? I cannot. That is not my place to do that. They're going to do that until they choose to get that under control. But I can choose if I'm going to let that be in my presence, in my ear. Remember, we learned that we have a hang-up button on our phone, don't we? We learned to say no. We learned what's important. God, let me create and establish and communicate my boundaries, and then we have to enforce them. If I create a boundary, then I have to be willing to stand and enforce it. If I'm not willing to enforce it, I should never create one, because it creates more harm than good. Because then they never know. Sometimes they can violate your boundaries, sometimes they can't, sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. And you're angry all the time, and they have no idea when you're going to blow up. You become a walking minefield. You ever know anybody, don't raise your hand, that's emotionally unsafe? You don't know when they're going to blow up. You might be fine, and next minute they're blowing up. That's not a safe person. So I'm going to remove myself. They're going to do what they're going to do until it's right before God. That's between them and God. I will pray for them. But I'm not going to stand and be in the presence with that.
Is it possible to have too many boundaries?
It is. Thank you for asking that. The question was, is it possible to have too many boundaries? Thank you for asking that. I'm going to get to that in just a few minutes. If you give me a few minutes, we're going to go forward in our lesson right now. But it is. Absolutely. We're going to talk about misuse of boundaries. Now for a word of caution. The misuse of boundaries. Misusing boundaries often results in increased alienation. It results in division and separation. Boundaries should bring us together and make us stronger, because then I know what you need and you know what I need. But if not handled appropriately, they could actually divide us and bring division and alienation. Harm, not good. Instead of increased love, it should bring love. Some examples of misuses are as follows. Let's say a wife that gets angry at her husband. She's just mad. And her first recourse is always, I'm going to get a divorce. And she divorces him. That's just the way she handled it. She's just mad, I'm going to go get a divorce. That brought true separation, didn't it? But properly laid boundaries could handle most problems. You still can't control the anger that habits of that person. Healthy boundaries. We're talking about a husband maybe who controls his wife, or a friend, or a coworker, or a sibling, someone that tries to control you by their actions, but they call it setting boundaries. They're trying to control us, or us trying to control them, and calling that setting boundaries. That is not boundaries. That is manipulation. Boundaries and manipulation are not the same. Boundaries are not about controlling the behaviors and the action of the other person. They're about controlling what's allowed in my territory, my yard, that God gave me responsibility for. That would bring more harm than good. Those that use consequences and withdrawal to get revenge on their husband, or their friend, or their spouse, or their sibling, or their parent. I'm just going to withdraw. I'm just stay away from everybody. Consequences. What are we doing? We're just creating walls. We're creating barriers. We're not creating boundaries. That brings more hurt. That brings more harm than a healthy communicated boundary that says, if you yell at me like that again, I'm just going to remove myself until you can speak to me in a respectful manner. That allows that person to know that they're a part of the healing and the decision in this relationship. Instead of saying, I'm done with you, I am out of here, and you just leave. I set boundary with them, I just said I'm out of here and I left. That is not a boundary. That is a wall, and that is a barrier, and it causes more harm than good. Don't think in our anger that we can set a boundary and say, I'm done with you, I am out of here. I'm not listening to that. Click. That is not a boundary. Because you never communicated to that person, this is the violation. This is how it makes me feel. And if this happens again, then I'm just going to excuse myself from the conversation. I'm going to hang up. I'm going to walk away, drive away, go in another room. You have to communicate. You must establish, you must communicate, and you must enforce. But enforcing in anger and calling it boundaries, that's not boundaries. That's division. That's walls. That's hurt. That's pain. You have a question? In a situation, come and see Pastor and I. Let's talk about it if you need help with that. Sometimes it's not always clear. How do I create this boundary? How do I enforce this boundary? First, we're going to tell you go to God. Number one, you need to pray. Then if you still need counsel, come and talk. Practice. Practice setting small boundaries as you need to. Don't go today and make a whole list of boundaries with everybody a wall around you. You're going to wall yourself in. Choose the things that's most hurtful, most important. Very important. Another example of a misuse of boundaries is someone that excuses their rage attacks by saying, I'm just being truthful. You ever hear that? I'm just telling you the truth. Well, I'm just telling you what you need to hear. No. You're not communicating anything to me. You're pointing a finger and accusation in a self-righteous way. And that only brings division. It doesn't bring healing. We're talking about misuse of boundaries today. Boundaries were never designed to end relationships, but to preserve and deepen them. Boundaries were never designed to end relationship, but to preserve and to deepen them. Boundaries are ultimately for working within the relationship, not outside of it. It's for what happens here in my yard, not what happens anywhere else. When conflict and suffering come into relationships, boundaries are not about escaping from the responsibility or the suffering. I just want this pain to stop, so I'm going to make boundaries. No, you're not. You're making walls. I want the suffering to stop. No, you're not. You're making walls. You have to sit down and seriously pray before God and say, Lord, is there a true violation that I need to communicate? I can't just go and make boundary after boundary after boundary. I will wall in my relationships and I will destroy them. For those that are just walking in, today is our last lesson that we are having on boundaries as a part of our Emotionally Balanced Life series. We're talking about misuse of boundaries. We have to be careful. When you have someone that's, for example, that's very, very critical, sometimes we look at an ungodly type of suffering. Would it be someone's criticizing, and then we just comply. We just do what they want us to do to win their approval so they'll stop. That's an ungodly suffering. But if it's a godly suffering, then we would learn to communicate, establish a boundary. We would learn to communicate. That when you criticize me, that is not right before the Lord. I am going to remove myself from the room. I'm going to hang up this phone. I'm going to take a drive. I'm going to remove myself from your presence. Because I don't want to be in that type of relationship. You have to stand as a boundary of what you will allow in your life, in your territory, what's right before God. Sometimes boundaries are mechanical. Maybe you live in a household with a number of people and nobody else wants to help with the housework, and so you're left doing it all, and they're going to let you do it. The ungodly way to suffer would be to just pretend it's all okay, ignore it, you just do it, but really you're raging and you're angry inside. It's taking advantage of, disrespecting me. But a proper view of godly suffering would be to say, if you don't participate, how many of you ever read The Little Red Hen? What did she make? Does anybody know the story of the Little Red Hen? She wanted to make some bread. She asked everybody to help her make bread. I won't go through the whole story. And so she asked the duck and the pig and the cow and all of her barnyard friends. But nobody would help her gather the grain or press the grain or take it to the mill or cook the bread. But when it was time to eat, everybody wanted to come eat on the barnyard. A little red hen turned and said, you didn't help me when I asked you to help me gather the grain or take it to the mill or to cook it. And so now I'm going to eat it all by myself. That's what she did. That's a children's story. How many ever heard that story? The Little Red Hen. Sister Swarzler style. How about that?
Very good.
Godly suffering. Letting others be accountable for themselves. I love cooking for the household, whoever it is that's in your household. Baby, family, mates, be friends. I don't know what the households all look different. But you know what? I'm going to let you cook for yourself and care for yourself, and I'm going to care for myself until they learn, and you learn, everyone learns to clean up after themselves. Because God did not make you responsible to carry the burdens of someone else. We learned that in one of the first 2 lessons. God made you responsible for your own burden. Does that mean you won't love and serve out of love? Not at all. But taking advantage of is not love either. Healthy relationships, healthy boundaries, being wise. Boundaries are not ultimatums. We're still talking about misuses and boundaries. Boundaries are not ultimatums in our relationships. Hear this very closely. Boundaries are about ultimatums. Well, I gave them an ultimatum. You did not set a boundary. You simply told them what to do. You violated their space because you told them what to do, and that's not your or my job to tell anybody what to do. I'm responsible for what God gave me responsibility for. Boundaries are part of a long and often trying process, which involves more than just limit setting. It's more than just setting limits. This is my limit. I'm out of here. That's not healthy, is it? That's misuse of boundaries. Spiritual and emotional growth requires prayer, requires time, requires effort. If we're going to grow spiritually, we're going to pray. We're going to spend time with God, and we're going to spend an effort learning about Him. If you're going to create healthy relationships in your life, then you're going to take time, and you're going to learn to recognize what is a truly needed healthy boundary and take that before God. You're going to practice and learn, how do I communicate it? Not in a way that attacks my neighbor, but in a way that communicates clearly. This is the violation, and this is how I plan to enforce it, because I don't want to participate in that type of a relationship. And then you're going to learn how to enforce it. Just as it is in your spiritual relationship with God, every relationship that is worthwhile has boundaries. And if you're going to have healthy relationships, then you're going to have to practice and you're going to have to learn. The greatest thing that you could do for yourself is to get online and pull these notes. Pastor's going to be putting them online. And practice, and learn. Why? Because you want to have healthy relationships. You let one unhealthy relationship in your life, it's going to clog your drain, and the Spirit of God cannot flow. There's nothing good that can flow through your life, because everything that enters your life gets stuck right here at that clogged drain. Then even your healthy relationships begin to hear about your unhealthy relationships, and then you begin this triangle, and then you begin this drama, and that's exhausting. I desire not to be a part of that kind of living. I want my life to be at peace. Why? Because I want to walk and do the will of God. And I can't walk and do the will of God if I'm busy doing my own will. If I'm busy violating other people's business and boundaries. I just need to be responsible for me and what I'm responsible for. I just need to communicate to those around me. This is how I choose to live my life. I want you to be a part of my life. I want to have a real healthy relationship. For us to have a healthy relationship, this is what has to happen. You can't call me on the phone and begin to vent and yell and cuss in my ear and scream at my face or harm me bodily or dump all your work on my desk at work. Whatever it is, it's violating the boundary in your life. Identifying that. Communicating that clearly. No more. Will I allow this? I will remove myself. I will take the issue to management. Whatever you need to do to hang up the telephone. Learning to say no so we don't overtake things we shouldn't. We have to remember that we have to give our loved ones and our friends time and grace to grow and change. Healthy relationships begin because we love those that we're in relationship with. We care about them. If we didn't care, why would I even take time to communicate with them? Or why would I even take time to decide if there's a healthy boundary? I would just leave. So if I'm in a relationship or a friendship or whatever, any type of relationship with someone, then it must be worthwhile. That means I need to invest in it lovingly, with wisdom, with godly wisdom, not of Lisa's understanding. If I do things under my own self and the way that I think is right, it's going to fall every time. It will fail every time. Because what Lisa thinks doesn't matter. I'm just going to tell you. Well, I think and I feel and this is what I understand. You know, it doesn't matter. What you think and you feel and you understand, my friend. What matters is what he thinks and what he feels and what he knows. And until we learn that, we will walk in strife. We will walk in turmoil. We will walk in trouble because we're trying to exercise our own will over his will. And we can never succeed in that way. We will never excel trying to upstart our will over God's will. Never. Only God's will. When God takes priority in our lives and he is glorified in our lives, then all things are made right. all things are made pure. All things are made holy. God is a good God. Boundaries are part of a long and often trying process which involves more than just limit setting. Spiritual and emotional growth requires a lot of things to take place in our lives. We must give our errant relationships, spouses, friends, children, siblings, whoever they are, co-workers, the time and the grace to change. I told you I'm done with you. That is not healthy enforcement. How many can do something the first time and excel every time? Anybody? I can't. I try very hard to try something new. But I'm going to mess up because I'm human. How many's like that? Anybody like me? Because I'm going to make a mistake and I'm going to operate in my flesh sometimes and do things I maybe shouldn't or don't want to do. Sometimes your loved ones are going to want to honor your boundary. I do not want you to speak to me in that manner any longer. I want to honor that. If my spouse said that to me, I would want to honor that. But I may have a bad day and mix up. And I pray that God would give him the grace and the mercy to work with me until I learn to do better. So it is with me. If I establish something that I need with a relationship in my life, they might mess up. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, isn't that what Pastor says, or something like that? You don't, do you? Just because they get dirty and mess up and get all muddy, you just bring them up and clean them up. We're being grace. When somebody messes up, you're going to have to enforce it and do what you said. If you said you're going to leave and walk out of the room, walk out of the room, go for a drive, hang up the phone. You do what you say you're going to do. But you go back and let them try again. You go back and you exercise mercy and you let them try again. New habits take time. How many know that is true? Just as you're learning, those around you are going to be learning with you. Oh, I have to act differently if I want this relationship with her. I really want to be friends with her. So I'm going to have to learn how I need to act, that I cannot bring my trash and my drama and my conflict into her life. I'm going to have to practice not dumping on her or him. Because they've said they'll just excuse themselves and hang up the phone. I might take a minute to learn for somebody. Doesn't mean you don't enforce, you still enforce. But you give them grace to try again. Question in the back.
So at what point do you just completely discommunicate? Somebody continuously is crossing your boundaries and
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that you guys
Yes.
and give them chances, but at what point?
The question is, at what point would you cut off that relationship and no longer strive? When you're married, you have a covenant. I have a covenant before God with my husband to be with him the rest of my life. I will stand with him the rest of my life because I made a covenant before God I would do that. Many others have done the same. Sometimes physical abuse or other types of abuse into relationships, and the person continues to show that they are not willing to change behaviors, not once or twice, but really have communicated, and it brings harm physically, emotionally. I don't mean it makes you sad, it makes you angry. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about true abuse, not anger. There are times that even in a marital relationship that you have to separate yourself from that marriage for your own safety. Pastor would never advise anyone. He is a licensed, if you don't know, a pastor is a licensed counselor. He would never advise anyone to stay in a relationship where there was true abuse and that person would be harmed. Every relationship involves, or change in relationship involves time and investment. So I'm using examples of marriages, but that's for friendships, any relationships. Give that person time. Give them grace. And it might come that the violation is, it kind of depends on the violation. Every situation is different. And it could be harmful enough that you might have to have a time of separation even from a friendship. Or some friendships just have to be resolved. If someone doesn't want to walk beside you and be your friend and respect you as a friend, sometimes you have to resolve that friendship and release it. Sometimes you can't hold on to every friendship. Relationships are different. You have a relationship with your children. Those are complex. That's not all easy. But it's similar and in the same. That if they're violating to a point that it brings harm, continual harm, or disruption in your life, there might be a time of separation, not of hurt. I'm not separating you to hurt you, but I'm just going to keep to my territory and my area of responsibility. And when, or if they decide that they want to be a part of their life, they become a part of that decision when you hold them accountable. When you say to them, I want to be friends with you, but this particular thing that you're bringing into our friendship can no longer be. It violates my boundary. And they show that they disrespect you and disrespect your boundary, and they trample over your boundary. In friendship, sometimes you have to release that friendship or let there be a separation. Same with children. The adult children, that is, of course, we're talking. Sometimes Mama loves you, and I want you to come home. But when you come home, you need to speak respectfully. And you need to respect me as I will respect you. Remember, healthy relationships begin with me. I work on me first. And how I communicate and how I feel. And all that I communicate is out of love. And it makes them a part of the decision if that relationship continues. Because relationships are two-sided. You don't have the control over both sides, only your side. But you do have a participation in the boundaries that define the relationship, as do they. Because there's things they're going to need in the relationship as well. And I have to do my best to respect them and to honor them. So yes, your question, that there is times it goes beyond the repairable. And some things become irreparable. But those things are dependent upon the type of relationship and the circumstance. And we can talk at greater level on that at any time, of course, with anyone. Let me see where I left off here. When you love someone, you are for them. I want us to get this. When you love someone, you are for them. That's why I care about them. I've chosen to care about them. I'm on their side. I want this to be a beautiful relationship. So whatever I do in this relationship, I need to do from a loving perspective, not from vengeful and not from punishment. I need to check myself first. I can't control. They're going to make their decision. You're going to perhaps draw a boundary there, perhaps. And they'll have to make a decision if they want to invest and continue that relationship as well. It's a two-sided, every relationship is two-sided. When problems arise, the first thing to do is to establish that I desire the best for the person that I'm in the relationship with. If I'm in friendships and relationships and I don't desire the best, then I shouldn't even be there. My heart is wrong, or I just don't belong there. Or I need to truly repent and let God fix my heart. First and foremost, I'm so sick of them, they never do the dishes. Let my heart be right first. Let my heart be right first. And I want what's best for them. I know they're busy. And I know they had a hard day. And I love them. I'm going to go do these dishes because I love them. Does that mean you're always going to be dumped on? No. But first and foremost, you need to decide, even if they are dumping on you, I love them first. First thing I have to establish is I want love to define my relationship with them. Because every decision I make needs to be made out of love. Even when they don't love themselves, that's when it gets difficult. Sometimes people don't love themselves. They live in anger at themselves. But you can still love them. Do you know God loves us even when we don't always love ourselves? But He still loves us. Aren't we learning to love like God loves? We are. God, let me learn to love them as you would have for me to love them. Let me learn to honor them and desire the best for them. There is almost no relationship where, or let's use a marriage for an example, that only one spouse is at fault without any contribution of the other person. It is all their fault. All of our problems are because of them. They did it all. Never happens. Because the relationships are two-sided. Now there might be one participating party that brought about a situation that brings an ultimate separation because for whatever reason, but the problems in every relationship are two-sided. Healthy relationships start with me. I need to make sure that I'm evaluating myself first. Whatever the problem is, I need to invite them to change before I set boundaries. I would like for this behavior to change. I ask you to please don't speak to me in that manner anymore. Please don't slam the door and run away, whatever it is that's bothering you. I would like you, invite them to make change first. Give them a chance first. Why? Because we love them. Why? Because we love them. We need to do all things with empathy and love. And we need to offer to help them. Can I help you in making this change? Maybe there's a change that needs to be made that we know is difficult for them. What can I do to help you? Maybe their automatic recourse is just to find 1 minute. They just become screaming and violently screaming at you. Okay, when you are angry, you figure out, is there some part that you can play to be a part of that solution? And I want to do that. I can't fix their decision to fight and scream and yell. I cannot do that for them. Maybe that wasn't the right example, but maybe there's a part that I can play in healing the rift before I even have to place a true boundary. I have to have limits. You always give warnings. Lack of warning before boundary setting may result in your spouse or your friend or your coworker or your child a grown child feeling ambushed. There's nothing worse than you're just sitting there one day and all somebody just ambushes with you, demands, and what they want, and you have no idea something was even wrong. Speak to them first. Give them a chance to change the behavior. Because then if the behavior doesn't change, it brings about the proper manner in which it necessitates placing a healthy boundary. I will have to remove myself if this happens. I love to speak to you on the phone. And I've given you opportunity and requested that you do not do such and so. But that has continued, so I now have to set a boundary that when this happens, I'm going to politely dismiss myself from the call and I'm going to hang up. That's a boundary. And then I have to do that. But they weren't ambushed because they knew I'd been asking them not to do that. Don't ambush somebody. Why? Because we love those that we're in relationships with. When we have to communicate to them and warn somebody, I need to let them know. I'm asking you to do this. Or something more painful could happen in the future. I'm really going to have to pray about, you setting some boundaries. Healthy boundaries. Not walls, not barriers, not methods of control and manipulation, a healthy boundaries. When you set a healthy boundary, their behavior determines what happens. The ball's in their field. They are responsible for correcting the violation that they're performing. And if they respect you, they will do that. And they will honor you. If a husband, excuse me, and I keep using that example, let's say a wife, excuse me just for a minute, has out of control anger, I apologize, I think I swallowed wrong, then you communicate. If you continue to rage, I am going to have to put a distance between us to protect myself. That's a fair warning. You're letting them know I'm going to have to put a boundary up. If you continue to rage, I'm going to have to put distance between us to protect myself. That's a fair warning. I'm giving them the benefit of a warning. Last part real quickly. Be patient. Patience allows the process to happen while you are also providing the ingredient for growth. Patience allows that healthy relationship to grow. Be patient. That's what we all struggle with. Make sure you're loving and you're truthful while you allow that other person to grow. 2 Peter 3:9 says the Lord isn't slow to do what he promised, as some people think. Whether he is patient for your sake. He doesn't want to destroy anyone, but he wants all people to have an opportunity to turn to him and change the way they think and act. Let's think about that. The Lord isn't slow to perform what he said he's going to do. He's told us what he's going to do. But yet, he decides to be patient with us. That's what 2 Peter says. He decides to be patient with us because he doesn't want to destroy us. And he wants us to have an opportunity to come to him and to change the way that we think and we act. Isn't that the same that we're doing in our relationships? Learning to be patient and giving others an opportunity to change themselves before we sever that relationship or even think about that? Isn't that wisdom? Finally, most importantly, boundaries can be renegotiated as that person matures and grows. Let's say you set that boundary and that person no longer berates you and it becomes in a rage and screaming in your face any longer. And they've learned to honor you and respect you and to communicate with you in calm tones and respectful tones. Your goal in your relationship is to operate with as few rules as possible. You can renegotiate that. That may not be as strong, there might be something else, but that might need to be renegotiated. The guidelines of where that is. You can speak to me calmly. I'm going to sit and I'm going to listen and we're going to talk this through. I'm not going to just flee the room because I set a boundary 5 months ago that no longer needs to be there. I might need to learn to just sit and listen because there's no longer rage involved. They're no longer berating me. But they've learned to sit and communicate clearly with calm tones. Forgiveness. Everyone say forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
Is required. Touch your heart and say, I must forgive. Why? Because I have to live in forgiveness. Why? Because forgiveness is canceling the debt. When someone comes and learns to respect, we need to forgive them. We don't remember 2 years or 6 months down the road, well, you did this. But you know what? I've worked really hard to learn to respect and to honor you as you requested. Forgive them. You cancel a debt, it's gone. If I owe the bank $1,000, and Joseph goes to the bank, thank you, Joseph, and he pays my $1,000 for me. Thank you. That bank isn't going to send me a notice anymore, are they? Why? I don't know the debt. But sometimes, when people do things against us, we say we forgive them until we get mad again. And then we remember. So the next time the bank sends out statements and they send me a bill again. Is that fair? Right? No. Why? Because the debt's paid in full. It's already canceled. That's right. It's already paid in full. When things are corrected in relationships, forgiveness is vital. There can be no closet. People talk about the closets that you've just stacked full of unforgiven things, all the past. You shouldn't have a closet somewhere that your past lives in. You should never have a closet like that. And if you do, you need to find an altar and say, God, there's a closet in my life that's full of hurt and pains and anger and unforgiveness and bitterness and hatred. You let God take those things out of your life. That'll destroy you and every relationship you have. You won't even be able to have healthy relationships. You need to clean until you clean that closet. Can you do that on your own? No. You need to stand before God and let God clean it. And sometimes you need more. Come and talk to Pastor I. There's processes of healing that you can work through, that I can work through to find my healing. I must forgive. Why do I have to forgive? What does the word say? Anybody? If I don't forgive others, then God is not going to forgive me, is He? Isn't that what the word said? That scares me. Forgiveness is mandatory. If I was hurt as a child, I have to forgive. If I was hurt in adult relationships, I have to forgive. If I was hurt by a friend, I have to forgive. Because if I don't forgive, then God cannot forgive me. I need the mercy of God. How many need the mercy of God? I need the grace of God. Forgiveness sometimes is a journey. Forgiveness is a journey. It can be immediate. But sometimes there's many deep levels of hurt and pain that we need to gradually release to the Lord. He's patient in our relationship with Him. And He allows us to do that. But be willing to start the journey. It starts with the first confession. I choose to forgive. Forgiveness is a choice, it's not a feeling. Forgiveness is a choice, it's not a feeling. Oh, I feel like I forgave them. I have forgiven them. I've chosen to forgive them. Does that mean it's not going to rise up in my heart? In the beginning it might. And then you release it again and again until you feel it no more. My husband always tells us he was stung by a bee as a child, and I haven't forgot you. And it hurt really bad on his big toe. But it doesn't hurt now. But he remembers the pain. But it doesn't hurt now. You know what? Sometimes things hurt us in our relationships, in our past. But when we've forgiven, it doesn't take that memory maybe for us. But it doesn't hurt anymore. And we can be at total peace. Let me tell you, we're going to talk a lot about forgiveness at some point in our journey. But I want to give you hope, because you can be free from carrying the weight of unforgiveness. That will hurt every relationship that you have.
So doesn't the Bible say regarding forgiveness that we should forgive, 7 times 70?
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is that daily?
Continually.
Or is it just...
Continually. Continually. She asked about the question, about the word saying we should forgive 70 times 7. Continually, as often as needed. Isn't that what the Lord does for us? I'm glad that when I mess up, God doesn't pull out his tally book and say, well, let me count, hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You get one more time, you can do that, and then I'm not forgiving you anymore. And then I do it again, and nope. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nope, you're past your number. That sounds funny. But God doesn't limit his mercy, does he? Because he's gracious to us. And if we're like him, we're learning to forgive like him, learning to love like him.
And what's so amazing is not only does he require us to do that in our forgiving, he also does that.
He does.
So, I mean, it's like forgiveness is there no matter what we do.
That's right.
How many times we may mess up in an hour. The
Yes.
forgiveness is there. So he does it and he requires that of us. So.
That's right. I'll put this on for those that are online joining us. But God is always the greatest example of forgiveness. What he requires of us, he does himself, and he leads by example. I'm glad that in his greatness he has taught us to be forgiving, because he is so gracious to us. I know how I need to act. Oh, is it contrary to my flesh? Yep. But it's not contrary to my spiritual man. Because my spiritual man hungers to be like him. And my soul will never be at peace until I allow myself to walk in his footsteps in the way he would have for me to walk. I want to honor him, don't you? Any other questions? A couple questions. Anyone else? Let's stand in the place today. Anyone else have a question or a thought, comment? We've concluded our lesson today in talking about boundaries, establishing them, communicating them, enforcing them, not misusing them, making sure that boundaries are built to bring stronger, healthy, meaningful relationships, not to bring harm, hurt, control, or manipulation. Boundaries are about peace. How many's ever heard and thought boundary to be an ugly word? Let me tell you something. Boundaries aren't ugly words. They help me understand and help others understand who I am and what I allow and what I don't. Jesus. Because if I don't understand what you allow and what you don't, then how can I really know you? If you don't ever tell me, how would I ever know? If you don't communicate clearly to me, I don't truly know you. Unless I know the things that you like and dislike and what honors you and what doesn't honor you. We're all different. We're made unique. We all have the same basic needs. We all need to be respected and honored. But God created each and every one of us with a very sensitive, private, emotional place in the depths of our spirit where love abides. And when that's violated, our hearts can be hurt and become angry, and then they become hardened. And then we just run and we just flee and we just survive. And that's a worthless a time in my life or any one of our lives that God can't operate, and we're miserable. And our relationships are miserable. But learning to know that God created you uniquely in his image just as you are. And what your needs are matters. Sometimes we might feel selfish. I'm just going to do it because. That's allowing violations to continue. Sometimes you need to know that you matter. What you think and how you feel matters to God. And it should matter to those that care about you. And when someone really loves you and cares about you, they also want to have a healthy relationship. And they want the relationship to be strong. Have you ever tried to be in a relationship with someone that won't talk? Everything's one-sided? Don't have to raise your hand. That's tough. You can't be in a relationship like that. Lord, my heart be tender, let me bare my heart. Let me communicate clearly and freely. You're not doing anyone good by staying silent. But you might do a world of good about being honest. reviewing your relationships. Create the boundaries that you need to create so your relationships can be healthy and strong, so that you both feel safe. And you're going to find your relationships will flourish before God. And you might find a spouse or friend or loved one so dear in ways that you never knew it could be. Because now you feel safe to be who you really are. To be vulnerable and allow them to love you as you love them. Boundaries are vital. God taught us in His Word. He taught us how to place boundaries for safety. Boundaries of honor, boundaries of respect. We have to learn to do likewise. Let's bow our heads. Lord, I pray in your name that we learn to be like you.